Welcome to the Speechie Side Hustle podcast. Today we're joined by Melanie Evans, and we're going to be talking about from burnout to abundance, rewiring your money mindset as a speech language pathologist. And I'm super excited to get into this topic today. I'll go through our learning outcomes first. So by the end of this episode today, you'll be able to describe how subconscious beliefs and scarcity mindset can influence career and income decisions, explain the relationship between stress, burnout, and financial decision making in clinical practice, identify mindset shifts that support more aligned, confident, and sustainable career growth, and discuss how an abundance based perspective can influence long term career satisfaction, equity, and fulfillment. All right. So, Melanie, thank you so much for coming on to the Speechy Side Hustle podcast. I know you've been on the Speechy Side Up podcast before. You've been a presenter with Tassel many times, but we're so happy to have you back.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely love working with you and with Benita. So thank you for having me back for such a different topic.
Do you want to introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about what's going on with you lately?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Melanie Evans. My pronouns are she, her, or ella, because I am a Spanish bilingual speech English pathologist. I am currently based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I have practiced in Houston, Texas. I've practiced in Maryland. On the speech pathology side of things, you might know me from Pediatric Speech Sister. When I started my career, I was really deep in cultural responsiveness and DEI. And I also do have a coaching program to help people who are aspiring speech English pathologists take the praxis exam. So that has been some fun things on the speech side. So all of that has led me into becoming a certified master mindset coach. And that's pretty much what we're going to be getting into today. My biggest mission is helping purpose-driven professionals heal scarcity blocks at a subconscious level so they could build wealth for themselves and their families. So my mission or my purpose has changed from helping those academic achievement gaps. And I noticed that now it's leaning more into closing wealth gaps from within. So I'm very, very excited to be here and to bring this to this space.
That's awesome. And I'm so excited for you to share more on this topic too. And for everyone who already probably knows me, but my name is Nicole Yumana dos Santos. I am the COO and ASHA CEA for Tassel Learning, the co-host of the Speech Side Hustle podcast. I've worked as an SLPA since 2017. I got my degree from Emerson College, and I'm also the founder of Nicole Yumana Creative, where I support small businesses with branding and design strategy. And I am passionate through all of these projects for helping clinicians build aligned, sustainable careers through entrepreneurship and creative growth. So let's dive in. So, what does money mindset mean in the context of an SLP? And why do you think this is such an important conversation for clinicians right now?
Yes, first of all, I love all of these questions. The very first bullet is that speech pathologists are trained to help people, but not necessarily to build wealth while doing meaningful work. And I believe that the money mindset piece, a lot of that comes from our training in the field, being in a helping profession, and possibly limiting beliefs around how much we're able to make. Sometimes we hear all the time, and I've actually heard this going into job interviews and negotiating, that it's not about the money. And I think that, even with that hiring manager who said that to me, I think that that is probably the worst thing that we can tell people in helping professions, especially when we're talking about money mindset, because at the end of the day, we are doing this, yes, because we have a passion for the service, and also because we have families to feed and legacies to build, right? And so our money mindset reflects the beliefs, the experiences, and patterns that influence how we earn, how we spend, how we save, how we receive money. And so there are so many examples that can come with this, but the biggest thing that we're seeing, and I'll talk a bit about this later on, is in the nation, there's a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck. We know that people are really struggling with money at this time. And so we can understand, and what we found, that you can expand your money mindset starting simply from within, from your own beliefs around your ability to hold your money. So our beliefs can really influence our career and our financial decisions.
Yeah, I love that. And I love thinking about how it's not so, sometimes it's not so much about how everything's working around us, but what we can change inside first to shift how we think about money and how money can come to us, and also like what we need to ask in our positions as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So you talk about the Navigator program and Gatekeeper. So can you break down how these impact an SLP's ability to grow their income and career?
Absolutely. So there are three internal systems that influence change, and this is something that I came up with and I thought about as far as our internal systems. And we can think of our navigator as our conscious mind. So our navigator sets the goals, makes the plans, decides what you want. One thing to keep in mind is 5% of our thoughts, our behaviors, our patterns are ruled by our conscious mind. So we can say that our conscious mind sets the goal, but our subconscious mind is actually the program that brings it into fruition. So we can almost think of our minds like a computer in this way. Our subconscious mind is ruled by 95%. So our behaviors, our thoughts, and beliefs are ruled by 95% of our subconscious mind. So those things that are happening underneath the surface that we might not actually know. But that is actually what is driving our automatic patterns from past experiences. That's why in the mindset coaching world, we might say that motivation is a myth because, you might set a goal, for example, every New Year's, people have a goal, maybe to have a certain fitness goal, go to the gym, eat a certain diet. And then your conscious mind is setting that goal. Okay, I want to lose this amount of weight this year, or I want to look like this year. But once you start getting maybe a month or so in, you might start going back into your old habits. And that is because of what's happening underneath the surface. You might not actually believe that you are capable of achieving that goal weight. Now, your gatekeeper, that is your nervous system. In speech pathology, we learn a lot about the nervous system. In the healing and mindset industry, we're always taught about the nervous system. I'd love for us to think about our nervous systems as simply just our bodies and the sensations that we feel in our body. And that's what will also help us navigate and get to our goals. So, our gatekeeper, our nervous system, determines whether change actually feels safe enough to act on. To directly answer the question and how it can impact our ability to grow our career and our income, let's just say, for example, there might be the speech language pathologist who wants to go for a job promotion or who is tired of and I also want, we're talking about speech language pathologists, but Nicole, I recognize that you're an SLPA. So I also want to speak to SLPAs. I also want to speak to graduate students. I want to speak to really anyone in this field who are purpose driven and feel that, yes, this field is for them, but there is still so much bigger, even with the title and the role as a speech language pathologist, right? And so people who might be wanting to go for a raise, your navigator, which is your conscious mind, might say, okay, I know that I need this amount of dollars a month for me to feel satisfied with my life. So you're making that goal, you're making that plan, you're deciding that that is exactly what you want. Your subconscious mind, whatever your beliefs are, if you believe that, yes, I am someone who is capable of earning this amount of money, I am someone who already has the skills, the abilities, and the capabilities to make this happen, then it will almost be a no brainer for you to go and ask for a raise. Now, what we see happens is what we call the gatekeeper. Sometimes when it's actually time to go and ask for that raise, your body might tell you, no, not yet. We're not ready. That might come with more. And then that's when your beliefs start to come up. Oh, that might come with more responsibility. That might, first of all, I'm afraid of rejection. So I don't want to be told no. I don't want to feel like I am asking for too much money. I don't want to get fired for asking for more money. Maybe I need another certification to validate my request for a raise, right? So that's when the program and the gatekeeper can sometimes act against what our conscious mind actually desires.
That's so interesting. And do you feel like these are things that can kind of change, like all three of them can kind of change over time? Almost like what's like nature versus nurture with us, like when we start out in our careers, and like what's set in our beliefs of ourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just if that made sense.
No, it did 100%. Yes, like you said, nature versus nurture. we are constantly changing and constantly evolving. So, what you found acceptable 5 years ago is not what's going to be what you find acceptable today. The goals that you had set out that you had 5 years ago will continuously change and adapt because we are changing human beings. And that is actually what we want. We want to be able to grow and to change. And so, that is why it is important to continue to work on your internal belief system about your own abilities to achieve what you want to achieve. And it is important to make sure that you're staying regulated so that way your success can feel safe to hold.
Mm. I love like being able to think about kind of what's going on in our conscious mind, like where our intentions are being set, but then also like everything that goes into our decisions with our nervous system and maybe those thought patterns that we're having before, like that some part of that you can work on, you can change, but it's just so interesting to see them kind of like broken down like that. I love that.
Yes, yes, yes. It's always best to, the way that I was trained is really to think of our minds as a computer. So there are things that we can program in, like those positive beliefs, like I'm worthy and capable of making this amount of money per year. I'm worthy and I'm capable of achieving this goal. And then we'll program out those beliefs that say I'm not worth it or I'm not capable, or even those limiting habits and decisions that keep you from reaching that goal.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. So
Yes.
how do subconscious beliefs or the scarcity mindset show up in ways that SLPs make career and income decisions?
Absolutely. How do subconscious beliefs or scarcity mindset show up in how speech pathologists make career and income decisions? Well, the very first point I wanted to make is that we don't always make decisions based on facts. We actually often make them based on the meaning we've given past experiences. I do have here a citation from Ross and colleagues from 2022, and they actually talk about advanced childhood experiences and our neural pathways. So, no, not everyone listening to this podcast have been through adverse childhood experiences, but if we can think of our subconscious mind as a sponge. And so a lot of our beliefs are formed before the age of 7. They could be formed while we are in our mother's womb. They can be formed from past generations. If this is part of your belief system, it could be even from past lives. And so, with that, that is also how our brains and how our nervous system are formed. So if you've gone through a adverse childhood experience in childhood, or if historically maybe your ancestors have gone through really challenging and traumatic experiences, our neural pathways are adapted to that experience as a way to protect us. So that way it doesn't happen again. That way the worst case scenario doesn't happen again. And so when it comes to making your career and income decisions, if there's something, let's just say I'll speak, for example, income. And if you have a certain goal to make a year, I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say that you want to make 6 figures, $100,000 every single year. You might actually subconsciously have a fear that you don't want to have family judgment from making that much money. You don't want to carry all of those responsibilities for making that much money. You don't want to be, a lot of visibility fears come up when when you make a lot of money, or when people make a lot of money. They don't want to be looked at as the wealthy friend. They don't want to be the person who is more likely to get ridiculed for making so much money, just for example, right? And so scarcity can actually sound like I'm not ready, or who am I to charge that? I need more certifications. And those are the things that come up to the surface. A lot of times we notice that it's a bit deeper. And so when we recognize our money patterns and how we desire our legacy to look, we can begin making decisions from intention rather than just habit.
Wow. Bullet one, I think will sound or resonate with so many people listening to this that, we don't always make decisions based on facts. Like we make them based on past experiences, different thought patterns we've had in the past, or maybe just that we're acting out of fear. But I feel like that's so true. Do you have an instance or maybe an example you can give us where you started with that thought pattern of not making a decision based on facts or making a decision based on just like past fears and kind of how you were able to move into that next step or that next stage?
Goodness, yeah, there really are so many examples. Let me think. I'm an entrepreneur and I am still, contracting with a speech language pathology company because I have certain financial goals. With that said, there are still sometimes, actually, oftentimes when it's time for me to say, okay, you know what, I am ready to negotiate a raise every single year. I feel like I can negotiate a raise. Or let me go ahead and launch this for my business, even if no one signs up and buys. Even though the what if no one signs up and buys is a fear, right? And why wouldn't they buy? Why wouldn't they buy? But to directly answer your question, I think that certain limiting beliefs about my identity, for example, I am a Black woman in America, and not to just immediately speak as if that automatically limits me systemically and historically. It has. It's limited my ancestors. It's even limited me in this lifetime in certain ways, or it's caused rejection in certain ways because of that, even with my complexion, being of a darker complexion. And so sometimes I do have to talk to myself and tell myself that no matter how I present, I'm still worthy and capable of achieving a job or achieving a goal or a task.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that example. And hopefully that also resonates with some people listening. And so when we're able to kind of recognize maybe that we're not asking for, I don't know, we're not challenging those raises, like, are there other ways that we can think or look back on what maybe our money patterns are? Do you have other examples of maybe that how that's shown up for you or how you've seen that shown up for different people you've worked with? We talked about like recognizing money patterns, and you kind of gave an example of maybe not asking for a raise or asking for more money in our jobs or challenge that every year. Are there other money patterns that you've noticed with other people you've worked with?
Yes. So I will say the biggest thing, and this is still under the Ross and colleagues where they mention it, but our money patterns can also be directly correlated with our attachment styles. For those who don't know what attachment styles are, I know that that's actually been a buzzword over the past few years, which is great because it's, becoming more known. But attachment styles are pretty much how we relate to people. And that is typically formed during childhood, or that's how it's taught, is that it's how we relate to people. We can also look at it as how we relate to people, places, and things. So, our desires, in this case, we're talking about our money, our finances. And so, if you are someone with a more anxious attachment style pretty much means that you do not like to be separated from that thing that you absolutely love or desire. You do not want to be separated from it. And so that's when we can see, this is my word, this isn't an official word, but like chronic saving, like those people that are like, absolutely do not want to spend my money. I don't want to see it gone at all. Now, anxious avoidant attachment style, that's someone who might actually avoid looking at their bank account. That might be someone who also spends a lot of money, just allows the money to go because they don't actually feel safe with that money in their account. And so if we look at what that could look like in a relationship, people might push other people away because they're anxious avoidant. But in our finances, that means that we're just pretty much spending all of our money and also avoiding actually looking at the numbers and what we're doing. So that's typically where I see that play out.
That's so interesting. Yeah, like we can, and for different people that you've worked with or different areas that you've talked with people, like, do you feel like people kind of know what their money patterns are ahead of time or that like attachment style they have to money? Or is there advice that you would have to kind of give someone for them to be able to recognize maybe what that attachment style is to see what kind of patterns they're making?
I will say that it depends on the person. I mean, most of the people I work with they have self-awareness skills. They do a lot of inner work. So by the time they come to me, they're frustrated because they keep hitting the same block, or what we call the same ceiling. And that's when we do have to go a bit deeper than just the attachment style, even though we work with the attachment style because that's at the nervous system level. But a lot of times there's subconscious beliefs that are driving that attachment style. So if they're feeling anxious avoidant, if they're noticing that they're more so, it's also called fearful avoidance. So if you're fearful of checking the numbers or fearful of making those purchases that you know would actually benefit you long term, and if you feel like you are more so apt to making purchases on those short term injection, like dopamine injections,
Mhm.
that's when we can say, okay, what do you think that money means about you? That's when we actually get to the root cause and we start asking what happened during childhood. How was money talked about in your household growing up? We can do techniques for them to identify what happened past generations and what do you need to know from this root cause event. And the key word is root because it's from the subconscious mind, it's from the root. So, what do you need to learn from this root cause event that will help you in the future, ensuring that it's future oriented, positive, and about you? So that way you can actually move forward and create new neural pathways for yourself.
So interesting. So let's continue talking about this even more with maybe stress and burnout. So, how does stress and burnout influence the way clinicians think about money, growth, or even staying in certain roles?
Yeah, I will say the biggest thing, and this is really in a nutshell, is burnout can really impact our brains and how we make decisions, our executive functioning skills. So, especially if you're someone who already is neurodivergent and then you're experiencing burnout. And I also just want to say shout out to my diagnosed and undiagnosed or self diagnosed neurodivergent folks listening to this, because also we're in a capitalist society, so the structure of the systems that we're working in does not think about how our specific brains actually work, which also can cause the burnout. This is me speaking from experience as well. So burnout does not just affect how we feel, it actually influences how we decide. There are articles that say when we're under chronic stress, our brain naturally prioritizes safety over growth. We can also think about what is it, the hierarchy of needs. And so if your basic need is survival, let me just, even though I'm burnt out, let me just show up to this job because I have rent to pay, I have a family to feed. This is all I can think about. I can't even think about starting a business or starting a side hustle, or pretty much burnout takes away that creative energy that you would have to even create what you want to create to earn that extra income for your household. Other ways that this can look is that you stay in a job that you know that you've outgrown because it feels safer than actually making that change. You keep putting off asking for a raise. I know I keep talking about the raise conversation, but that's one of the biggest things I also see. But you keep putting off asking for a raise, starting a private practice, creating another income stream, or you tell yourself, I'll do it when things calm down. Let me wait until after this season, after this semester, during the summertime. But seemingly that moment just never seems to come. And that is what burnout typically looks like when it's time for us to grow our income.
Yeah. And so when we've stayed in kind of some of these roles, do you think that there are some different signs that we can look for when we've kind of outgrown where we are, or that we can kind of like different signals we can give ourselves on like, oh, maybe I am just staying here because it feels safe more than like I'm growing.
Mm. My biggest indicator is your purpose. So in Japanese, we call it ikigai. In Indian culture, it's your dharma. And so if you think of it like that, if you think of whatever you're doing, and if time is passing by or it seems like you blink and then the day is over, that's how you know. That's one indicator that you are in the right place. But if you find yourself constantly looking at the clock, checking the time, if your body, most importantly, is feeling like it's in hyper stress, if you notice that you can't go to sleep without thinking about your job or your work, you could also look around at the people around you who love you most. I remember I was in this highly stressful work environment. And when I finally made the decision to make the job, my family members said that they saw the difference. They just saw the difference. One day I was dreading going to work. It was snowing outside. I was dreading going to work. And then finally we got the email that the clinic was closed and my whole energy changed. And yeah, so and my loved ones noticed that. So I those are definitely the biggest things. Just look into your ikigai, look into the different tasks and passions that you do. that make you feel like you can do this without making money. And then, of course, charge your rate, right? Don't do it without making money. But if you feel like you can still do this for free and feel a lot of joy from it, that's how you know that you're in the right place. If you feel like you're moving slow and like you're losing a bit of your personality, then that is definitely a key indicator that you're probably burnt out from what you're doing.
Mm, very good points. And so for some clinicians, maybe they move into starting a private practice or creating another stream of income. I know at first maybe it's overwhelming. You're wearing so many new hats. Do you kind of have any advice for how you can kind of keep out some of that old pattern of the old money mindset from creeping into these new opportunities, like something that can kind of maybe protect you moving forward into something new?
Yes, one of the biggest thing, and I'm really so happy, Nicole, that you asked that question. One of the biggest things I will say is we can think of it as a journey. So even when you decide to step out into, and let's just say you're a first time side hustler or, first time business owner, you decide to step out and do the thing. A lot of times I don't want to say facade, but like the misconception is that, you become an entrepreneur and then all of a sudden things change. All of a sudden you get your time back. All of a sudden you're getting your dream life. And that's not always the case because, Nicole, just to the point that you're making is since a lot of these habits are in our nervous systems, it's easy to fall back into the same thing. Or if we have a limiting belief about ourselves or about money, that you have to work really hard for it because that's kind of the society that we live in, then it's going to be easy to just leave one job where you're working really hard to going into entrepreneurship and working actually twice as hard. And sometimes you might actually see little returns. So, to answer your question, what can you do to make sure that you actually avoid that pattern? A lot of the things that I teach, and I call it the legacy alchemy experience because we're changing things at the nervous system level for us to pass down to our children or the new generation in the society that we live in. So we're completely changing the legacy. And so you can change this immediately by looking at your patterns. At the end of every single day, at the end of every single week, I actually just did this because we're about to enter quarter three. And look at your rhythms. What happened quarter one or what happened this week? What felt really good to you? What task felt really good to you? What task felt really draining? Did it feel draining because there's a learning curve, or did it feel draining because you've simply outgrown that task? Like, for example, sending emails or creating content. That might not be your thing. Your thing might actually just simply be to do the speech therapy. And that's when you know it's actually just time to delegate it. But I hope that that directly answers your question, Nicole. But the biggest thing I will say is self-awareness, delegation, and checking in on your rhythms, your daily, your weekly, your monthly, and your quarterly rhythms, and noticing when you feel most charged up, and notice when you're feeling a little bit depleted, and move accordingly.
Yeah, I love that as a recommendation that you can kind of base that off of a quarter, doing like an audit of like the things that you liked, the things that brought you joy, and then being able to see like, am I in a position where I can, bring somebody on a subcontract or a VA
Right.
or something like that to kind of keep your keep yourself protected and not just kind of go through the same cycles as you said.
Yes, and doing it for yourself. I like how you said, just something along the lines of seeing if you're in a position to hire someone and creating a reality where you are in the position to hire someone. Maybe it's not this quarter, but you might be able to say, okay, I know that next quarter, I know at the end of the year, I'll actually have more wiggle room in my finances, or at least I can use this quarter to build my income stream and stash some monies away. So that way I can delegate it to a virtual assistant or to an intern. And then being creative where you outsource can really, really make a difference in how much time and capacity you have. So that way you're not overworking and falling back into that high stress and burnout reality that you're trying to escape from in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't just become kind of the same thing in a different font.
Exactly. Literally in a different font. Exactly. Exactly. And a
So that's
different
kind of,
outfit. Yes.
yeah, exactly. In a different outfit. So that's kind
Exactly.
of how it would kind of look like for yourself to assess what's going on. So then let's talk about what it looks like to approach career growth or side hustles from that place of alignment and purpose instead of urgency and fear?
Yes, I really liked this question. And I wanted to make sure that the way I explain this is a way that steps away from woo. And when I say woo, I'm someone I'm not afraid of woo, but I also know that we're speaking to a whole bunch of speech pathologists. So I also want to ground it in science and things that feel practical.
Exactly.
So when we're talking about approaching career growth or side hustles from a place of alignment and purpose instead of urgency or fear, the very thing I thought about is actually your finances, because I do want to talk about building wealth. So that way, just to the last point that we made of overworking, that way you can actually feel that fulfillment in your life and feel your version and ideal of success, especially if a lot of your values are freedom and family and other things that are actually outside of your career. Continue to build your financial literacy so you can confidently earn, save, invest, negotiate, and steward your resources. That's what the abundance piece can look like. And that's how you can continue to grow. Develop the identity and nervous system capacity to support your next level. So, this is where we start talking about alignment and what will feel aligned. So, set your goals, release those limiting thoughts, and embody it. And when I say embody, I mean think about the identity of the person who has your version of success when it comes to your side hustle or your career growth. Of course, understanding that it's a journey, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It might look a little bit different from what you envision, but as long as you know that you are still embodying that identity of the person who achieves what you set out to achieve, you can really feel that satisfaction and alignment. You'll know that you're misaligned when, first of all, values, and that's the next point, is to take consistent, values aligned action toward the career and life you want to create. One of my favorite ways to do this and to think about it is, let's just say a lot of us work for school districts, we work for clinics. And so if this clinic or school district, if there are certain practices that you recognize are misaligned from your values, and I mean like really go and look at your core values. If you notice that they are doing things that are against your values, your body is going to feel it. And that is a signal that that it really is time to pivot. A lot of people like to make changes within the organization. I'm not always that person. Okay. I will say this organization is not aligned with me. There must be something that's in more alignment, that's values aligned for me in the career that I want, the life that I want to create. And I notice that when I start to make those changes, and of course, make them wisely. I'm not saying like quit your job today, but I'm saying create a plan, build that financial literacy so you can safely pivot when it's time to. And I notice when I make those changes, my income grows, my life satisfaction grows, my career grows, and I release some of that burnout from being in the wrong environment, that my brain actually has more capacity for more creativity, for more amazing ideas that serves the populations that I want to serve, and then also brings more income into my bank account. And then finally, let's talk about urgency and fear. So urgency is driven by fear of what might happen, and alignment is guided by your values, your purpose, and your long term vision. So, you know that you're making a decision based off of urgency or fear if you are anxious. Like, I need to get this job because I do not want to be jobless, which a lot of times that could be an alignment. But if you notice that you're hopping to a job just because you don't want to be jobless, but you notice that they're not paying you what you know that you're able to be paid. Look on Glassdoor and what the rates are for whatever position you're going for. Then that's how you know that that's more so from urgency or fear rather than from alignment.
Mm.
Yeah.
I liked so many of the points that you said. Can we go back a little bit to talk about like building that financial literacy
Yeah.
for maybe somebody who is starting like very low or doesn't have a lot of financial literacy? Can you kind of give some pointers or any resources you found of what maybe that looks like to somebody starting from scratch on Yeah, financial literacy, like a little 101.
Yes, absolutely. So there are oh my gosh, so many books. I wonder if I need to send you a list of books after this. So many
Would be
books that
great.
I've had. Yes, I will definitely do that. Social media accounts, podcasts, books I would recommend. Think and Grow Rich. That's one of my favorites. There's Think and Grow Rich, the Black Choice. That's specifically for African Americans, just because our lifestyles historically have definitely been different, and the mindset can really be different. So I really appreciated that book. But Think and Grow Rich is a great one. We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel. Oh my gosh, Rachel Rogers. We Should All Be Millionaires. She also has another book called Something About Side Hustle. She actually has a book about side hustles. It's on Audible. So she has a lot of Audible books too. Looking at those books, Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of the typical ones that people recommend. I'll be honest, I did grow up with that book in the sense that my parents read that book, and so I do think that naturally by them reading the book and valuing that book, it came off to me. But that's a book, if you asked me about it, I honestly couldn't tell you much about it. Yes, but I would highly recommend that. Just continue to be curious, just like how you might have a spark to learn more about a certain subject or topic in speech pathology. Do the same thing and approach it with the same curiosity. There's a lot of free trainings out there, a lot of free webinars. Of course, fact check, because there are going to be people who are really just simply speaking from their own experiences and their own little facts, which of course are helpful, but you want to go with the tried and true. And then the biggest thing I will say, especially when it comes to financial literacy, this is when I recommend being purpose and goal driven. So let's just say that I'll speak for myself. I know I want to continue to grow my income because I have nieces. And thankfully, with the financial literacy piece, I'm being proactive because I want my nieces to be able to have the life that they deserve. I want them to make it to college. They're in middle school right now. I want them to make it to college and not have to worry about money simply. And so I want to be able to contribute to our family tree in that way. And that would be my purpose. I believe it's my purpose to be financially literate so that way I can go on podcasts like this and talk about it. It's my purpose to be financially literate so we can break generational patterns that kept us from growing our income in the past. It's my job to do it. It feels like my purpose. So same thing for you. Whatever your purpose is, whatever you feel like your big why is, use that as your North Star. Just like in joining this field and getting through the praxis exam and all the things. Think about your big why. What is your North Star? And then set micro goals to reach that North Star and to reach that long-term goal that you have.
Yeah, I also have a little passion about financial literacy as I started to learn more things in my 20s. I don't feel like for me and some of my like background too, I also feel like I came in from like a place of urgency or fear and kind of just looking at like kind of a small month to month numbers. But I
Sure.
also, it doesn't matter if you're a grad student, undergrad, whatever age you are, that those financial literacy skills can start young and just grow from there. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing some of those books. I wrote them down, the Think, Grow,
Think
and
and grow
Rich.
rich.
Think and
Think
Grow
and
Rich.
grow
Okay, I
rich.
wrote it really
Yep.
quickly.
We should all be
And
millionaires.
Rachel,
That's a great
we should all
one.
be
Yeah.
millionaires. Rachel Rogers. I'll definitely share
Yes.
those two on our socials and in our
And I have one
show
more book
notes
to
as well.
recommend.
Oh, of course.
Yes. One more. So this is for the folks who are also into like the energetics of money or the energetics of things, and also who are a bit more like on the spiritual side of things. I highly recommend reading the book It's Not Your Money. I remember I was what we say down bad. Okay. I was at a rock bottom moment and someone recommended that book to me. They didn't recommend Think and Grow Rich. They didn't recommend those books. But when I was at my rock bottom, they recommended It's Not Your Money. And it really helps you, especially with attachment style,
Mm,
detach from the anxiety that money can bring sometimes. It's called It's Not Your Money because we can, from that sense, we can look at money as more so a universal resource rather than something that we have a lot of control over. Of course, those micro habits with the earning, the saving, investing, negotiating, we can play a part. But at the end of the day, especially if these are, people who have that value of faith and being more faith-based and spiritually inclined, this is definitely a book for you. So I highly recommend that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for recommending all of those. I definitely made notes of them, and we will definitely share that after as well for anyone who wants to start reading some things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I also love just how you talk so much about just identity around money, what that looks like, finding your purpose, what that looks like for you. Do you have any other kind of advice or recommendation for someone who maybe they're early in their career, maybe they, I don't know, are just starting on a financial literacy journey, like how they can really find their why when maybe they're not looking for a to start like their own private practice. Maybe they are like kind of more happy in that 9 to 5 place. Kind of how can they find their purpose too?
I would say that the biggest way, and especially just specifically speaking to that speechie who is completely satisfied with the 9 to 5, first of all, there's so much power in that because within the 9 to 5, even within the 9 to 5, there's a lot of growth career wise and income wise as well. So if you want to figure out your why, first of all, think about your why in joining the field. Why was it important to you? A lot of times when I'm working with praxis students, they'll say, oh, well, my brother had Down syndrome and I always saw him having a speech therapist and that really inspired me. Whatever that inner light was that kept you going, even through the hard exams in graduate school, even through maybe the discrimination, even through taking a 132 question standardized test, whatever that why was for you, continue to hold on to that why. And then also be open and flexible because sometimes your why might change. My why changed. And so I would just say, to look at what you're given as a data point. And when I say what you're given, sometimes I almost mean like what the universe gives. So I'll just give you an example. So my goal when I started my educational path was to be a broadcast journalist. My dream, my goal, my vision was to be like Oprah. I actually saw myself on news stations doing things like that. And then I actually did not like the scheme, like the graduation scheme. So I decided to pivot. And then I always say that the chair of the speech pathology department came down on their white horse and talked about the field. And I'm like, okay, this seems like something I can do. Well, I noticed that phonetics lit me up. I noticed that there are certain subjects that lit me up. And then I also really loved our department. I loved the professors. They embraced me, they poured into me, they made sure I got where I wanted to go. While in undergrad, and this directly speaks to the part of your purpose and what's coming at you, is there was a alternative spring break, and I'll keep the long story short, but I was invited to go to alternative spring break. It was my junior year of college, and I really wanted to go to the New Orleans one because the initiatives was education and prison industrial complex. I'm still really big on social justice, so I really wanted the prison industrial complex. Well, they just so happened, I think it was a glitch in how they did it, but I ended up being on the education side. Again, looking for internships, just so happened to apply to the United Negro College Fund. I ended up getting that as an internship and getting accepted in a fellowship program for education reform. So all of these things happened even before graduation from undergrad. And then it was time for me to actually apply to graduate school. So you never know what your journey will lead you. That led me down the path of education, caring about the achievement gap, caring about cultural responsiveness. And that became my big why. That became my purpose. That's when I felt fine and felt satisfied being in work environments that serve diverse children, for me, children in this case, because I knew that that was part of my why. So I knew that it was in alignment with my values. I knew that also I had a role being within that organization, keeping everyone accountable on making sure that they are walking the walk with cultural responsiveness and such. So that's the other thing I will say too, is to be your biggest advocate and to be the biggest advocate for why you're here in the first place. You are really serving the collective in that way. And with your purpose, I always say no one can do it like you. Like you are brought into this world as your own, with your own unique blueprint, and we need you. The collective literally needs you. So please continue to follow your purpose, your values. If you still are struggling with your why, I will say this. Think about something that you've overcome. Like, just think about maybe a big challenge that you've overcome. I just ran into someone who overcame breast cancer. She's a survivor of breast cancer, and now she has a huge platform on supporting other people who are, she's a patient advocate now, basically. So, something that you went through could also become your why.
That is such great advice. Thank you for sharing all that, your experience, your friend's experience. And I think too, I can't remember like a specific study that comes to mind, but I do remember reading something recently about how there's research about how having your purpose and having your basically your why on whatever it is that you're doing in life, when they looked at different people that were in the study, that consistently they found that these people had greater resilience, that they just engaged more with whatever field or job or whatever that they were doing, and that just generally their overall well-being was higher than those who maybe weren't as clear on their
Yeah.
purpose. So thank you for sharing
Yes.
that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just again, like think of life as a journey. If you are sitting here listening and you're like, I really actually do not know what my purpose is, that's when you can really lean into your values. Lean into your values and what you believe is important to you. And then also just think of things that you have personally went through and you believe that you're capable of helping other people in that way.
Yeah. Thank you. So
Yes.
let's also talk about some of those simple mindset shifts. And so what are some mindset shifts that can help clinicians start thinking differently about income, about opportunity, and what their career growth can be?
The biggest thing that I can tell you, first of all, start with the goal. So I normally like to, in my legacy alchemy method, I do like to start with the purpose. And then for those who are unsure what their purpose is, we spend some time working with that. But at least have the goal in mind. What do you want to create? Why does it matter to you? I mentioned here the self determination theory because it's going to be your self determination that essentially makes it happen. No matter what, even if I fall down, I know I'm going to achieve this goal because that's what I set out to do. I've noticed that with people who are first generation college students. We found self-determination theory was essentially what helped them get through college, pay for college on their own and graduate. The other thing I will say as far as mindset shifts, and this is the big one, is to align your identity, your beliefs, your values and your capabilities with the future you are creating. Robert Dilts created the logical levels of change, and you will see there are different areas of our life, specifically identity, beliefs, values, capabilities, even our environments that can actually support us in achieving the goals that we set out to desire. And this is still, even though we're mentioning environment, this is still all about your mindset. And then also, I will say too, as far as mindset shifts and setting yourself up, since I mentioned environment, setting your environment up for success to make those mindset shifts, ensure that you're surrounding yourself constantly by people who are embodying what you desire to embody, who have shared values with you, shared beliefs. Maybe at this time you don't have, maybe at this time you might notice some limiting beliefs within yourself. Get you a mentor who is at least a step or two in front of you so that way they can pour some of that positive belief system into you because they're going to see the other side of where you are right now. And then also take one consistent action while building the financial knowledge and habits to steward abundance well. Understand that it's a journey. So we always heard, I'm coming from the cultural responsiveness background, right? So cultural responsiveness is a journey, it's not a destination. Same thing, abundance it's a journey. You're not just going to be there. So just continue to take one consistent action and build that financial knowledge and habits so that way you can steward your abundance well as you continue to grow.
Awesome. Thank you for all of those points. I mean, a lot of that kind of aligns exactly what we talked about on the previous slides as well. But just being able to not just being in like a prepare stage or thinking about like, I feel like I could always be in that stage forever of like thinking of preparing, but actually taking it into
Yeah.
action and what you can do to just start now, because you're never going to feel that, like you said, like when things are ready, or we can also always wait around for the next season. But
Yes.
what we can do, you can always start right now to build that knowledge and those habits and to, I don't know, just feel in control of what your financial future is going to be. It doesn't have to feel so scary or out of our control, but there are things that we can start now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, how can SLPs begin to reframe success in a way that includes abundance, equity, and long term fulfillment, and not just from productivity or just from income?
I really love this question. The biggest thing that automatically came to my mind is first of all, only you can decide or define for yourself what success looks like. Of course, that can be based on your values, your purpose, most importantly, and the life that you want to create. But what does success look like for you? Of course, there's the bigger picture, long term success. Some people are like, success for me looks like owning multiple properties, having several businesses, having this life, this family. And I think that that's also very important too. That's the life that you want to create. And I would really challenge you to look at your purpose, like look at your purpose, look at your values. If your purpose is to be, there's different purpose or dharma archetypes. I didn't include this in our conversation today, but just think about what you are really good at and what lights you up. You might be an artist at heart. You might be an entrepreneur. You might be a visionary. You might be more so a warrior, someone who likes to advocate and fight for others and help people fight for themselves. Whatever that is, know that when you are in that purpose, in that dharma, in that ikigai, that you are actually already successful. But only you can make that decision for yourself. Success is actually often, what is it, subjective? Yeah, it's often subjective. Another thing to recognize is financial abundance acknowledges both personal agency and systemic realities. So I love how you said in a way that includes equity because there are, of course, systems in place. We can't deny that there are systems in place that unfortunately it's not always an equitable society. I will say that. So we can advocate for more equitable systems while continuing to expand our own opportunities. Whenever there is a door shut, of course, I'm going to continue to advocate. And I love the phrase that rejection is often redirection.
Mm,
So really think of it in that way. While of course advocating, if you're sensing injustice somewhere, advocate in the way that you know how to advocate. Some people are the ones who will go up to Capitol Hill. Some people are the ones who will march and protest. Some people are the ones who will simply walk up to their boss and tell them that something's wrong. But other people are the ones who will go to who is more so designed to do that advocacy and just trust that that's advocacy. That's still advocacy. The final point I want to make about this that the goal isn't just to achieve abundance, it is to become someone who can multiply it. The more that you lean into your abundance mindset, reframing your success, going after your goals, you will continue to receive. You will notice that opportunities will be all over the place for you. Like your mind will actually be open to the infinite possibilities that you can achieve success. And that's also what abundance is. There's no limit. That's pretty much what abundance means. There's no limit. At that point, it'll be your job to multiply that abundance. And that's when you know that you've really reached another level of enlightenment.
wow, that is very powerful. I love that we started from such a, like, you can look at the nitty gritty, you can look at numbers, you can look at your why, you can look at kind of where you want to be. But at the end of the day, it's also just like how you look at success and how you look at what you want your life to be. And these are just different kind of pillars that kind of support that over time. But I love that last
Yes,
sentence that you said that, you can, try to achieve your goal isn't just to achieve abundance, but to be able to multiply it and to see those opportunities to be able to grow. I feel like that's such a great, such a great line to be able to look at and to have hope about your future as well.
absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And again, it really is a journey. I have been working on, I will say since 2018, I've been setting intentions, but specifically with my finances and looking at it this closely, that's been maybe 2023 when I started training in this work. And I will say I've reached a certain level of success. I've definitely reached a certain level of abundance, and I'm proud to be a leader in this industry. And I still have goals. Like, that's the beautiful part of still being alive, is I can say that if I pass away tomorrow, God forbid, I can be satisfied with everything that I've achieved. And I know that there's so much more that I still want to do. So,
Mhm.
yes.
That's great. And, you added so many wonderful resources that we'll also have in the show notes here. Is there anything else that you want to touch on with these 4 different articles?
Absolutely. So I did want to give you all some evidence based research. And then also, of course, you can type it into Google and you'll see different diagrams and charts. So as many people know, when you're reading research articles, they don't always come with the colorful charts that we need to actually like process it if you're a visual
Mhm.
learner. But I will say specifically with the Robert Dilts, Changing Belief Systems with Neurolinguistic Programming with NLP, that's where a lot of my training is. And that's where we can actually talk about this is the fun part for speech language pathologists, but we can use the power of language to essentially create whatever reality that we want to create for ourselves. So please definitely look into that. We have Jimenez Solomon and colleagues, and this is when we're speaking about when money and mental health problems pile up. So this is when we can think about how burnout, stress can really impact our financial decisions and our relationship with money. So that is definitely something to look into. Ross and colleagues, trauma of the past. I use this a lot in research, and this is when we're talking about the impact of ACEs with adult attachment. So when I mentioned money attachment earlier in this conversation, and if that really resonated with you, then I highly recommend looking at the Ross and colleagues article. And then finally, Ryan and colleagues, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation from self-determination theory perspective. I really recommend reading this article about self-determination theory because just from my own research, it was actually, I realized I researched people in college who were, like I said, first generation college students. And I wanted to know why, like, what was your motivation for going? And it really is something that is innate in you. And so this is something that resonates with you. Please read Self Determination Theory. And if self determination is something that you want more of, I highly recommend reading it with the question to yourself, what can I do to be more self determined? And then go back to the Delta article and he'll give you some pointers there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those. All of them seem so interesting, and they all had very good different points that kind of come together and can really help anybody. And we all, SLPs love to have research and know that whatever they're listening to for their CEUs is also backed up by research. So these were really
100%.
strong articles. Thank you so much. So, where
Yes.
can people connect with you if you want to tell us a little bit about the different services that you offer? And yeah.
Absolutely, yes. So please follow me if this work resonated with you. Follow me at The Abundant CEO. You'll hear a lot about mindset, not just with your finances, but relationship, your goals. If you just need extra tips and support on building a legacy, you can go there. I also do have some free resources that I would love to offer. It's also on my Instagram page. I have a whole masterclass where it's actually called Regulated and Rich. So becoming the person who is able to hold wealth and able to hold the success that you are desiring. And then I'm certified in hypnotherapy. So I have an abundance mindset reset free hypnosis track on there as well for you. If you're listening to this, you notice that scarcity has been rearing its ugly head and you just need a little reset, especially for the school-based SLPs who are still recovering from the school year. Yes, Pediatric Speech Sister, that is my clinical page. That is my cultural responsiveness page. I am on there from time to time. It's still my baby. So you'll still see information and research on there all about cultural responsiveness, cultural responsive holidays, and ways to incorporate cultural responsiveness into your treatment plans. And then finally, Praxis Speech Sisters. So if you have any students or know anybody who is preparing for the SLP Praxis exam, please send them my way. We have very talented tutors who are here to support you. We have to support them. We have a whole curriculum that includes some of these mindset strategies to help with boosting confidence, test taking anxiety, and ultimately preparing them to be the speech language pathologist that they desire to be. And then finally, you can follow me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/Melanie Yvonne Evans, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing everything and for all of those tips and tricks. And this is going to be available for ASHA CEUs on Tassel. So you can earn zero point 0.1 ASHA CEUs by listening to this and doing the follow up quiz. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Speechy Side Hustle podcast. And we hope you all have a great day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody.